Mark, you can do a little bit more of an introduction for yourself if you want. So tell us who you are, who you're with, and then we do want to know your favorite fall activity as well.
Okay. So Mark Pond, Business Research Librarian for the Spokane Public Library. Been here in town since 2006. And favorite fall activities, well, as soon as we wrap up here, I'm hopping in the car and going backpacking out in the wilds of northern Idaho. So nothing better than a fall day like this to spend the weekend outside. And also, second favorite activity apparently is matching my pants to my chair. So that's another skill set that
that's a good activity.
Yeah. From there.
Okay, so tell us, so I know there's a ton to dig into. I wrote some questions down. I think where I'd like to start is it seems like from what maybe some of us knew the library was growing up as a kid to the 2023 version of what the library is, it's sort of, I feel like the libraries are going through like a renaissance. Like you're really digging into what you can do to support the community. So do you want to talk about that a little bit? Like maybe how the library's just shifted a little in general? I know I probably threw you a curveball there, but.
No, happy to talk about it because it's fascinating, at least to me.
Yeah.
So I won't go too far back, but grew up in Kettle Falls, up here north of town, in a logging, ranching family, and I was a logger during summer breaks for high school. Spent a full year after high school logging, and a couple close calls, broken ribs, and I thought, I don't know if this is going to be the career path for me. So many stops along the way, ended up at University of Washington with my master's degree in library science.
Oh, wow.
And that was in 2000. So I really got into the library world in 98 when I started the master's program. And I'd been working in libraries kind of off and on up until then. But literally my vision of what my day-to-day work was going to look like would be that I would wear my tweed jacket, I'd have the leather patches on the elbows, maybe a pipe, and I would be back in the back stacks, never getting in front of a room full of strangers. Well, not exactly strangers, most of you, but a room full of folks to talk about libraries. That was so far from what I really wanted to do at the time, at least. And so libraries, literally for hundreds, if not 1,000 years at that point, the model was we'd buy something good, we'd put it on a shelf, and we'd expect the public to come find it. That worked really well. For a really long time.
Scalable model, right?
Yeah.
In the business world, we love that term.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I just happened to stumble into this world right at the very moment where that just completely dissolved and it went away. Suddenly, libraries went from kind of having the corner on the market in terms of doing any in-depth research. If you wanted to do research, you had to go to a library. You had to pick up your feet, go into a physical building, and then literally, overnight, we went from basically zero competition to Google, Amazon, Netflix, Microsoft. I mean, you name some large for-profit entity bubbling to the surface in early 2000s. Suddenly, those became our head-to-head competitors, and it was really tough, really awkward. So from like 2000 to, moved back here to town in 2006. I'd say 2006 to like 2012, those were really the bleak years where I just sat at the downtown Central Library waiting for business questions to come my way. Kind of that old model, like, I'm here, people, come talk to me. And it was complete radio silence, absolute crickets. And 2008 financial crisis hit, kind of had an existential breakdown of like, oh my God, professionally, I have no idea what I'm doing here. City was starting to lay people off, and I'm like, well, if I'm trying to decide who to lay off, it's probably that guy who hasn't answered a business research question in a couple of years. So, really not in my wheelhouse at the time, but I was like, okay, I just have to go start knocking on some doors around town and figuring out what it is that we're trying to do here. And kind of took the toolbox of resources that we had at that particular point in time and just started. I think I started with GSI and said, hey, here are some tools that we have available. Is it of any value to you? And first 12 hours doing that had some pretty significant wins where people are like, oh my God, I just paid $2,100 for that same chunk of information like 3 days ago. Where were you? At the library.
We were at
Where I was supposed to be.
So now it's a branding issue, I guess.
Yeah. And I didn't get into the library world to be in sales and marketing, but that's kind of what I figured out was like, oh, we need to completely rearrange what we're trying to do here.
Excellent.
So that was kind of the genesis. And then from there, it's just kind of snowballed.
So, okay, so since we're on that path, let's stay there for a minute, unless there's other questions. Tell me about, I know there's a lot of tools. We'll give you an opportunity to talk about that. But right now, what's your favorite business tool that the library offers? And tell us about it and why.
Yeah. It's like trying to name your favorite kid, you know?
I just read this research that apparently a lot of people have a favorite kid. I didn't know that. I don't know.
Oh, you know nothing about it.
Yeah, I know.
No.
They're all
Good cover.
equal.
Yeah. Well, if backed into a corner, if I had to pinpoint one, actually it was Katrina that I have to thank for this one.
Yeah.
She kind of floated it past my radar. We, here at Spokane Public, we're the only public library in the known universe that has a subscription to PitchBook, which, if you've not bumped into PitchBook, database of companies that have raised private capital, so venture capital, angel investor, private equity types of deals. And you can either search for those companies, or you can basically flip the search on its head and search for the investors in a particular space. So it gets me to a whole universe of data that I knew was out there, but it just kind of fell beyond my grasp. So beyond just the pure utility of that particular tool, the other thing that makes me super excited about PitchBook in particular is that we're going on our 5th year, I think, seems like 4th year, 5th year, somewhere, 4th, 5th year, somewhere in that range. And it's a $20,000 a year subscription to this database, and the library's paid $0 out of our collection budget.
Yeah.
Because the library, what is working out really well is that we can kind of be just the crowdsourcing hub. So if I know that Katrina wants it, and WSU wants it, and Kelly wants it, and they're not going to pay $20,000 for their own subscription, but if I can get enough people in the room who are really interested and can maybe kick in $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, they cut a check to the library buys the license to the product, it then becomes publicly available rather than stuck behind the walls of one private institution. So
give me a feel. So I think I might understand this, but for those of us who maybe don't float in the funding, founder, startup world, who would pay for PitchBook outside? Like what kind of organization would pay for that and find value in that?
Yeah, so venture capital firm, they probably have their own subscription. Spokane Angel Alliance, they're really stoked to have access to it.
Okay.
More of a stretch, startups, although usually if you're a startup, by definition, you don't have $20,000 to throw at a maybe, of like, okay, maybe I can find a potential investor using PitchBook. So I definitely get a number of folks looking for funders, but that would be a chunk of information that would just be beyond their grasp.
Okay, interesting. So what is then, so that's your favorite. What's the most popular tool that businesses come in and say, I need help with this or I want to learn this?
So I think it's probably split 2 ways. One, used to go by Reference USA.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's one of them.
Now they go by Reference Solutions for the moment, but they're now wanting to go by Data Axle.
Yep.
Like, just pick a name.
Pick a name.
Stick with it. So that's our primary business directory. So if you wanted a list of all of the plumbers on the West Coast, that's literally a 13-second search. You can download those lists, dump them into a spreadsheet. They're yours to keep and play around with. So that gets used a lot for kind of competitive analysis of who else is out there doing something similar. Also gets used a ton for sales lead development. So if you've got some service or widget to sell to a particular type of business, it's really good for that. There's also a consumer side to Data Axle as well, which gets eerily kind of creepy.
I always say to people, that's where you have to take off your consumer hat and put on your marketer hat and go,
Exactly.
as a consumer, yes, this bothers me. As a marketer, this is exciting. Or, as a business, it's interesting to have access to this information.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I pretty routinely say I have kind of Jekyll and Hyde reactions where business librarian Mark, I get pretty jazzed about sharing that with local Spokane businesses because it's really valuable. Personal private citizen Mark, I'm like,
no.
I think I'm just going to pay cash
from
here on out and buy
it's
off of
too
Craigslist.
Late. It's too late.
Exactly. Yeah. But on the consumer side, just to kind of flesh that out a little bit more.
Yeah.
So kind of my prime example, woman that I worked with in the past, she'd been a personal fitness trainer earlier in her life, had kids, stayed at home with the kids. Now the kids are off to school, so she's got time to kind of pick up her career again. And she wanted to focus specifically on the health needs of older women. And we could use Data Axle to come in and say, all right, show us in Spokane County a list of women over 55 who are into their health and fitness. And then you get a list of 23,000 folks in Spokane that fit that filter with names and addresses, some phone numbers. So that gets used a ton for kind of site location types of questions. Like, oh, there's this concentration of my customer base is right over here and there are no gyms in that region.
Specifically, I was going to ask that question.
Yeah.
Because like if I wanted to start a gym that's tailored to say strongman, powerlifting, that sort of thing, to those types of people traditionally don't have any money. Located in a place like Wandermere with high real estate values where I know they have money. That sort of thing. So you could
Totally.
use those databases not only to stream interest that way, but tie it to income and land value, that sort of thing.
Totally. Yes. Short answer, yes. Yeah. It might require a couple of hops to kind of chain it together, but doable for sure.
So Victor is here from SCORE, and Victor and I know each other. I think I just got my 15-year SCORE mentorship plaque. I didn't realize it'd been that long. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it was 10. Maybe it was 10. Maybe more. Anyway, there was a mentor forever. His favorite story was how many homes needed to be in a neighborhood or in an area for every hardware store. And but that's actionable data that you can now get from a tool like Data Axle or whatever we're calling it this week. I could go, here's a neighborhood, there's no hardware store. You and I have talked about also like a coffee stand. How many homes are near a coffee, where there's not a coffee stand? How many of those people in that area get coffee on their way to work? We can start getting some of that data and decide whether or not a coffee stand is there. So for me, as a marketer and then a business owner, I always think if there's a business that couldn't figure out, like a coffee stand, maybe it was location, maybe it was not enough research, but you can get this information to make really informed decisions, especially retail location.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Hot tip. Francis, out towards 9 Mile, whatever that road is.
Oh, yeah.
So as you're heading out towards 9 Mile and Lakeside, there are no coffee shops or coffee stands anywhere on that stretch coming into town on the right-hand side of the road. And it's been that way for years. And
Suncrest would be the next nearest place, right?
Yeah.
So you'd have to, from Suncrest all the way in.
So there's a whole
pot
of consumers driving into town every morning.
There's
no
also no
stand.
bars there either.
Yeah. Let's address the serious concerns now.
Right. But, I think about that a lot because just right up the road from there, Indian Trail is one of my favorites, Happy Trails to Brews. And it's the only craft beer thing forever in that neck of the woods. And it's never not busy. It's pretty popular. So. Yeah. Okay, so that was one you said. You said there was two. What's the second one? So not that I want to rush along. I could talk about Data Axle for a long time.
Yeah. The other one that pairs really well with that is Demographics Now.
Is it still called that?
It is still called that, yes. Still called Demographics Now. They've been pretty consistent with their naming. And like the name implies, demographics, age, income, education, housing values, all those sorts of things. And it covers the entire US, like Data Axle. Also like Data Axle, you can set up your local market however you want. You can do a drive time radius around a particular address. You can draw on your own custom boundaries with a Google map. However, it's infinitely flexible on that front. But the tool within that I use the most, there's a chunk of data that comes from Experian, Experian credit reporting agency. And
remember, take that consumer hat off and put that other hat on.
Exactly, yeah. And it's called Mosaic is the name of the product. And basically, Experian, they're just sitting on, I don't even have a good estimate. Trillions, tens of trillions, trillions of trillions, whatever it is. A very large number of consumer transactions. Anytime somebody swipes a credit card, Experian gets a ping. They know who to tie that purchase back to in terms of a household address. And what they do with all of that is they they sell it for sure. And they also, they take every household in the US and they break us into one of 71 different household segments. And they gave us just some fabulous names like couples with clout and boomers and boomerangs and really pretty evocative terms where you're like, oh yeah, okay, I can kind of imagine who they're going after there. And then from there, you can heat map that. You can say, all right, I want the sophisticated city dwellers. Where in town are they and how many of those households do we have? And put it on a map. You can scan across the nation to see other pockets that you might want to go after.
Can you overlap? So say I'm interested, so Will brought up a really good point, and so our LinkedIn audience probably didn't hear that, which was if he wanted to do, what kind of gym was it again? Like a powerlifting, yeah, strongman power, but he said most of those people don't have money, so he'd want to try to figure out where in town, you know, looking at demographics and stuff like that. Can he then take that consumer data and do another layer that shows him gyms in the area on top of that so that he can make that determination in comparison? And the type of gym?
Gym, yes. Type of gym might require some legwork on your part to download the spreadsheet of here are all the gyms and then just insert your own column saying, they do, I don't know, the gym world. Is it?
I think I don't know that there's that many. What do you think there are? A couple hundred maybe, max? If that, in the area? Gyms? You could do that legwork.
It depends on what they're tailored to.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the new trend I'm seeing now is like you're having these smaller boutique just aimed at personal training.
Yeah.
You know, so where someone comes in, you know, they get their 30, 40-minute workout with a trainer and then they leave and you don't see anybody in there doing just whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know,
That would be tricky.
And so it depends on what kind of gym. You have bodybuilding gyms, you have those just the personal trainer gyms, you have things like Orange Theory.
Yeah.
People that are, you know, going in there to self-flagellate and suffer.
Yeah. The suffer gyms. Okay. So, all right.
I've got a question.
Oh yeah, fire. I was gonna say, do
Yes.
we have any questions before I start asking other ones? Okay.
Because, and I didn't think about this when we were looking through it the other day, that, I mean, you always want to know who you are in those categories, right? Is there an opportunity to look for yourself in that pile of data, or would you just have to kind of do it by?
You kind of have to get close. I've tried. I'm like, well, who am I? And there is a tool that allows you, say, if you've got a list of shipping logs, if you've just been shipping product out to households, it only really works with households. It doesn't work with businesses. But if you've got a list of consumers with their household addresses, you can upload that into Demographics Now and say, hey, Demographics Now, run that Mosaic report for my customer base. And when I first came across that report, my jaw was on the floor. I was like, oh my God. I mean, this is, if you've got a brick and mortar store and your customers are coming to you, you can kind of get a pretty good sense just on your own who your customers are. Like, oh, it's a 30 to 40-year-old mom with 3 kids in a minivan. Okay, I can kind of dial that in. But if you're in the online world and you're just shipping out product and you have no idea who's on the receiving end, that's kind of sometimes just this really opaque curtain. So upload that list, run the Mosaic segmentation report, and it will get you down to, so when I first saw that report, I was like, oh my God, uploaded a spreadsheet with just my household address, was the only address on the spreadsheet. I'm like, tell me. And it reported back some household type that was definitely not me. And I was like, oh, that's a bummer. So I did some digging and actually putting back on my private citizen mark hat. I was actually a little happy because What they do is they look at every household address, but what they return in the report is the most common household type for that census tract.
Okay.
So it kind of gets you down to micro neighborhood snapshot, but not all the way down to an individual
You
household.
can't drill down. Okay.
Right, where I can't say,
There are some
Mark
protections.
really, yeah, exactly. I mean, Experian definitely has the data. and
Yeah.
There's no question about that. But Suzanne had a question.
Just to clarify, if I were to export my client list by address, upload it, so I'm reverse doing, it will then give me a target within whatever demographic, logistic
Yeah,
locations that I wanted.
yeah, yep. So basically, it'll just return the report saying, all right, you've got 400 addresses, 36% are your digitally savvy young folks, and 12% are some other category. So short answer, yeah.
It's really helpful for those businesses that have a customer. I have a client right now that has a deep client list that they've been shipping for a long time, and they're always guessing who their customer is. Like and sometimes your gut's pretty accurate.
Sure.
But this really would show them, here's your primary, here's maybe your second. That would really give you a feel for where they're coming from, and then you can use that data to better serve that group, as opposed to manipulate that
Right.
group.
Exactly.
Sorry,
Yes.
I think somebody else was going to ask a question. What did I hear? Okay. All right. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
What are there limitations to the data sets that you can upload? How
I've had a company with like somewhere in like the 40,000 listing range. I think what they uploaded that whole list and it just kind of spun for a really long time. So they chopped it up. I think they uploaded it in like batches of 10,000 at a time. So, but in terms of kind of like some hard cap, no. Just kind of depends on your internet speed.
practical limit more than a-
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you could, if you ship nationwide, you might say, okay, let's take our Washington customers,
Mm-hmm.
throw them in there,
Mm-hmm.
our Idaho customers,
Totally.
and get back, and then you could aggregate that data
Totally. Yeah.
and get a pretty good picture of who is that customer.
Totally. Yeah, and I've had companies break it down either geographically that way or by product, like, who's buying what type of spice.
Yeah.
We know on our shipping log who bought what, and let's break it down that way, and then be able to get a whole bunch of data about how to inform a marketing campaign.
So just for our online audience, that question was specifically around limitations to the list upload. I keep forgetting to do that.
Yes,
I'm really
I'll try to remember.
neglecting our LinkedIn audience. Sorry, guys. Okay, so because these are obviously the two most popular tools, and we're getting a lot of conversation around this, one other question. So if I'm a startup or a brand new business, and I have a feel for who I think my customer is, but I'm not sure. How do I use the library to maybe make an informed decision around who my customer might actually be?
Yeah, probably using that Demographics Now tool, maybe you can zero in on 2, maybe 3 segments as likely targets, and you've got a whole bunch of data like, okay, do they respond best to direct mail? Do they respond best to social media? Within social media, is it LinkedIn? Is it Facebook? Is it YouTube? What platforms do they use? So it can kind of get you past the trial and error and mostly error stage, and maybe more to the trial stage where you can say, all right, I think that it's these 2 or 3 segments that I'm anticipating being my customers, and ideally I'd love to have the magic 8-ball to say, yes, absolutely, that's who you should go after, as opposed to no, move on to the next one. Sometimes it does require a little bit of testing.
Sure.
So maybe testing and kind of throw some messages out there, see how they land. But as opposed to just completely throwing darts in the dark, at least you've kind of got a target already in mind that you should be going after.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Quick question, follow up on this. So what's the, if you're taking actual customer information, you have some privacy concerns that you might have as a business.
Mm-hmm.
What
Sure.
to this database? Do I need to be worried about that?
Do you want to repeat that
Sure.
question, or do you want
So
me
the
to?
question
Okay.
was uploading list of businesses, customers, privacy concerns
Yeah.
with that, and how that data might kind of leak out. Couple of answers. One, it's always good to have privacy concerns somewhere towards the front of your brain. But specifically with that demographics now, that mosaic upload option, dentist office here in town, they've got HIPAA requirements that they have to be very aware of. But after kind of talking it through, when you log into demographics now, you're logging in with your library card, and once that card gets authorized, like, yes, it's a valid card number, it just dumps you into demographics now. Demographics now doesn't know who you are. And secondly, when you upload that list of addresses, it's just address, city, state, and zip code are the 4 columns that you need. And when that gets shipped from demographics now over to Experian already has those addresses. So and also, they have no idea when that list arrives. Is this Spokane County dog owners? Is it, folks interested in fitness? They don't know what the filter was that produced that list in the first place. So they felt that particular instance, that dentist office, they felt comfortable enough that it wasn't divulging, like, oh, here's all of our list of root canal patients and their household address. Yeah, it kind of stays one step removed from that.
And demographics now does not do anything with that other than feed it back to you in a report or the mosaic, right? It's not capturing that and making.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the other thing I would say to that, the PS to that, is making sure that, so like e-commerce, every step along the way with most e-commerce platforms like Shopify, the customer is agreeing to certain things in addition to your website with cookies and all that stuff. So you might want to do a double check of like, what things have you allowed them to opt in or opt out of before, but if you remove first name, last name, how much they've ordered, all the columns that you don't need, I think you're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah.
And as long as you're not selling that data too,
Sure.
I think that gets into.
Right,
Okay.
exactly, yep.
So we've talked basically about 3 tools, and I know you have a whole lot more. So you have PitchBook, we talked about, that's great for startups and investors, Reference Solutions or Data Axle or whatever their name of the week is, and Demographics Now. What are some of the other ones that you have? And we don't necessarily have to go through all of them, but what are some of the other highlights that you have access to? Yeah. And then maybe talk about a little bit the overlap between city library and county library, because you're pretty friendly.
Yes.
As far as what you're doing between the 2 library systems.
We try to play well together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
A couple of other highlights. So one, especially for my startups, I use IBISWorld. I don't know if you bumped into that. Just a market research database. It's national in scope, so you can't just drill down here to the Spokane market. But usually, IBIS, I-B-I-S, world, all one word. And usually what you get there are 30, 40, maybe 50-page market research reports of what's going on in hundreds, if not thousands of different industries. In terms of access, it's us and New York Public are the 2 public libraries that have access to IBISWorld.
That's it?
Last I
You're
checked.
like in rarefied air here as a library system.
So-
like, how is this not? I mean, we were joking. I sent him an email. I had ChatGPT come up with a list of subjects for this Business Brew, and it was like full of emojis, and it was like supercharged. Like, it was all these things, and we were joking, but realistically, it wasn't far off. Like what you have access to, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, Lowell. We were just chatting earlier, but Spokane, we're just this Goldilocks-sized community where what we're doing wouldn't work in Ritzville. Tip of the hat to Ritzville. Love you, Ritzville.
Yeah.
But they're just too small, that they don't have kind of the critical mass that we need to kind of justify these expenses. But also, we're not so big that, like PitchBook, they're headquartered just directly across the street from the Seattle Public Library, their downtown branch. And when we got our subscription, I called up my old coworkers. I used to work for Seattle Public. They're like, hey, Jay, guess who just got a PitchBook subscription? He was like, ugh. There is no way that Seattle Public's ever going to get a license because there's just way too much VC activity in the Seattle market, and PitchBook makes a lot of money selling those individual subscriptions. So
They've probably used the library to figure out where their customers are.
probably, yeah. So, yeah, sure, it's been some work on my part, but also we're just in a community that it makes it work.
Is there like a library conference that you go to and everybody's like, what do you guys, how do you do it? I don't know.
Well, not to toot my horn too loudly, but yeah, I think it was 2021, got the American Library Association Business Librarian of the Year Award.
What? Round of applause for, that's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
That is,
Yeah.
okay.
And the years prior to that, it was Stanford University won the award, Oxford, UNC, and I'm blanking on the fourth one. So
Interesting.
yeah,
They don't matter.
we're in a pretty unique spot.
Okay, so IBISWorld,
IBISWorld,
you're
yes.
one of only two. What else?
Right.
What else? Do you have?
Bloomberg Terminal. So if you've ever watched any Wall Street movie with numbers flashing around about publicly traded companies, that's a Bloomberg Terminal. Again, it's us, New York Public, Boston. They're laggards. They finally hopped on board, but they're welcome to play now. So that's another tool that is almost unheard of in the public library world. Yeah, and quickly coming back to IBISWorld though. So those market research reports, if you tried to just get to them on your laptop right now, $995 is what they charge for each one of those downloads.
Wow.
And you can come to the Central Library and it's an all-you-can-eat buffet. And I've had
So that's
folks
a
come in.
in-person at the library one,
Yeah.
whereas I know Data Axle and Demographics Now I can use from home.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's my ideal when I'm lining up these subscriptions, that folks be able to log in remotely. Sometimes the publisher is less excited about that. So Bloomberg, you have to be specifically at the downtown library at a specific terminal. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, forgot to repeat the question.
I could look up some pricing history data on, say, like a treadmill.
Ah,
Do you want to repeat that one?
So I
yeah.
can see the price change over time, or what maybe the things are currently selling for, because there's no
Yeah.
way to value these things unless you're deep in that market.
Right. So the question was pricing data, specifically to like treadmills. And I don't have anything in my toolbox that does a good job with pricing.
You must get asked that a bit. You kinda,
yeah.
I feel like you've fielded
Yeah.
that question before.
Yeah, and it gets really, I mean, if you're opening up a coffee shop, walk around town, take pictures of the menu board. And
No, I mean,
go.
you can't undervalue boots on the ground kind of research.
Yeah.
I think that's, yeah.
Right, but for services, I had, mental health practitioner somewhere here in town. They were trying to figure out, how do I price my service? And I don't have anything that I can just dial that in within
okay.
the tools that I have. So if you're aware of something out there, because I know there are tools that track like Amazon sales and that sort of thing, and I've contacted a couple of those platforms, but sometimes those conversations are very short. They're just like, public library? No. End of conversation, which was my first round with PitchBook as well.
Really?
I had to call them back up and
Good for you.
put the screws to them. Yeah.
Okay, so what else? Bloomberg Turbo, IBISWorld.
Business Source Complete magazine, newspaper, trade journal type of database. So Harvard Business Review.
Oh, I was going to ask about that. So that's, you can get access to that. Is that a in-person or
No,
online?
remote.
What's it called?
Business Source Complete. Yeah. Log in with your library card. We have Harvard Business Review, I think, going back to October of 2022.
Magazine or online articles?
It's the scanned PDF of the magazine.
Okay.
And you can do keyword searches across all of it, and then
Okay.
10,000 other
Mark,
publications.
is that a library-only resource?
Nope.
Because I've had trouble getting more than just like an abstract out of it.
Oh,
Yeah.
sometimes it varies from publication to publication within Business Source Complete. There are individual licenses between Harvard Business Review and Business Source Complete. There's an individual license between Journal of Accounting and Business Source Complete. So it varies title by title by title whether you get immediate full text access or just abstract and citation.
Does that include case studies?
No.
Okay.
The Harvard Business Publishing Unit they
They hold those pretty.
they
okay.
pulled those back. Yeah.
Okay.
It used to.
All right.
a long
Anything
story.
else of note as we,
Oh,
because we're going to
gosh.
shift gears pretty big. here in
Okay.
a minute.
Well, yeah, we definitely have other things to throw out there. Another one that
Yeah.
Lowell and I were talking about. RMA, it gets pretty wonky pretty quickly, but Risk Management Association is what RMA stands for. So it's a group of commercial lenders, CPAs, accountants. They take their clients' financial data, anonymize it, turn it over to RMA. Then RMA is able to put together these industry averages for financial ratios for your
Oh,
RIC ratio. And
interesting.
Yeah. So
Okay.
gets used a lot for buying and selling businesses. Like, how much should you ask and how much should you expect to get based on how your business is doing?
Okay.
You had a question about kind of overlap between the county.
Yes.
and-
Yeah. Let's
yes.
do that one. Yep.
Yeah, so it's my least favorite question ever, so let's skip over it.
Okay.
No, so Spokane Public Library, we serve the city of Spokane. That's our taxpayer base. We can give reciprocal cards to county residents, and they can, vice versa.
You can get a card though, real quick, if your business is located
Yes.
in the city, even if you're not. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that will treat you just as if you're a city resident. But I curse our city founding fathers that they couldn't come up with a different name for our city versus our county. And so we've got Spokane Public Library, and then we've got the Spokane County Library District. And the library district kind of serves the donut around the downtown core, or the city core. And it's super confusing. We're two separate entities. We're Spokane Public Library, we're just a department of the city of Spokane. So we're in there in the general fund with police and parks and fire and roads. So we're gonna have to duke that budget battle out every year. Whereas the county library, they're funded through property tax, which is a much more sane and predictable star to hitch your wagon to rather than sales tax revenue.
Okay.
But we try to work really well.
And they have some of the same resources, and I know
Yes.
I access those two databases mostly through my access with that, just because I'm familiar with it
Sure.
more than your
Yeah.
services.
Yeah,
which
and
is-
it's the exact same tool,
Okay.
regardless of how you get to it. Which, quick note there, SpokaneBusiness.org. If you've bumped into that, that's where we've got kind of countywide all of our business research tools pulled out there, and we try to explain relatively simply who gets access to what based on where your house is located. It's still kind of a mess, but Startup Spokane, quick teaser alert, probably starting in about 2 weeks maybe, we'll be switching over to Startup Spokane because we are taking over the Startup
that was
Spokane
my last
program.
question.
Oh.
Good job. No, you're golden.
Perfect. Okay.
Fire away.
All right. So the library, actually, Spokane Public Library, we're kind of taking the lead, but also working really closely in conjunction with the County Library District. We're taking over the Startup Spokane program, which started back in 2012. It was run through Greater Spokane Incorporated and worked really well up until basically COVID hit. And then it kind of has been in quasi-hibernation since then. But Startup Spokane, just designed to be kind of the front door, single stop entry point for all entrepreneurial activity around town. So getting new businesses and existing businesses, but primarily new businesses hooked up with all the tools, the research, connections around town to SCORE and the Women's Business Center and Evergreen Biosciences and whoever, New Venture Lab. Seems like I'm missing some folks here, but yeah, just being able to connect those startups in with those other business support entities,
Yeah.
which I've been here in town since, like I said, 2006, and I'm just now kind of feel like I'm figuring out who does what around town in terms of business support. So to ask our startups to just wander into that swamp and figure it out on their own, it's a big ask.
It really is. The
Yeah.
ecosystem is strong, but if you have questions, it was always tricky to figure out where to go,
Exactly.
even if you just needed somebody to point you in the right direction. So Startup Spokane, you've consumed it. It's now the libraries.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And so let's talk about some of the adjacent things that the library already had, but maybe now fall under this umbrella. There is a co-working space at Central, right? Is that's kind of part of the business services that you offer, right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little
Yep.
bit about that, because I like that space.
Yeah. So at the Central Library, we've got our business lab, which co-working space.
Yeah.
And it's just first come, first serve. I've got just over, I think it's like 205 registered users with key code access. I can get you key code if you want to come in and use it. The space is available from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., so well outside regular business operating hours. And yeah, it's kind of your picture a co-working space with some desks and some chairs to sit in. That's what we have.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Mark, based on my experience using the data from your, the resources, and I can, when we're trying to help business, they easily can find quantitative data. How about the quality data or the focus group? Because when we try to, you can do your segment, your target. But how about when you try to, we try to help people to make a pitch elevator or a unique selling proposition? You need to have some kind of information from focus group, which is quality data.
Right.
Does the library have
Yeah.
kind of research?
So question was, beyond just kind of secondary market research data, how can you get to more kind of primary and direct conversation with potential customers? We don't have anything along those lines, but not saying that we couldn't. It seems like maybe it's the sort of thing that could be kind of crowdsourced because, Women's Business Center, you have clients that need it, and I'm sure that there are any number of other folks out there. I know that WSU, I can't remember, Katrina, there was some office at WSU that would do kind of those panel focus group types of market research where they would go out, find folks to put in the seat.
That wasn't the Office of Commercialization, was it? It seems like that, but no, I
Yeah.
think what you're talking about really is, it gets further down into the idea about the business or the marketing piece,
Yeah.
right? The engaging students or in order to do that kind of human subjects research.
So part of the beauty of my world is that I'm in a profession where I get to just say, I don't know for a living, but let's go look it up. And I think this might be one of those where I'm like, I don't know.
Kelly,
I'm
is
not
that
sure.
something that the Gonzaga New Venture Lab could help out? I know there's like an application process, but if I was interested in just getting some people to maybe use my product or give me feedback, is that something that we could approach the students to do?
Oh, sure.
Okay, so I guess Gonzaga New Venture Lab is a
Okay.
a possibility. I was asked this. So there's a professor at Whitworth who is teaching market research, and he knew I was a marketer, and he asked me, like, what are the trends in market research? And I was like, well, outside of what the library gives you, and he was asking specifically about focus groups and things like that. I said, most of my clients don't have a budget or time or opportunity to really do that. And I'd say that's a big chunk of small to micro businesses. That's just not a reality for them. So it is a fascinating question. Getting people in a room talking about your product or your pitch or whatever could be helpful.
Totally.
I just don't know if how does the library source that, or we'll have to sort that out.
Yeah, I mean, definitely we could provide the space
Yeah.
for it. That's a slam dunk. But the gathering of the people.
Wouldn't
Yeah.
that be a workshop opportunity, though, something you could post to the community and say we're looking for this?
Yeah.
Or the other? Or, if you're a new business and you know your demographic, you've got to do some legwork, but if you have a community space, we can bring this kind of together and you understand what the expectation is. I think you'd have a lot of people that want to support that.
Yeah, that was just a comment from the audience for our online group. That was just, maybe there is an opportunity to pull that together for a business that wants it by doing workshops through the library. Speaking of library space, though, I think we would be doing a disservice if we didn't mention the Hive specifically as this is free event space that anybody can reserve with a city library card. So there's A, which is on this side, pretty big, B, and C. And can you get all three if you want it? And you can get all three. What's the maximum capacity between all three? It's pretty big. This is 55, it says alone. Yeah. So if
Yeah.
you have, any kind of business event that you're looking for space, and I know space is a hot commodity right now because it's so limited, but this is an opportunity for you. And I've used it several times for like board meetings and stuff, so it's a really good space. In fact,
Yeah.
I'll be here on Tuesday.
Excellent.
Again, doing
Well, I think it's important to recognize too that all the new libraries, all the new Spokane Public Libraries have such spaces. They're not as big as the Hive.
Right, there is space at all the
but
libraries, yeah.
There's a nice sized space down in the central library that's available, that's more like one of these spaces, as well as each of the individual ones have like a conference room if you were gonna have a board meeting or something like
Yeah.
that. All the libraries have a sized space like that.
Yeah.
Is there a caveat for this space? I know it used to be if I wanted to run a workshop where I was charging for people to attend, does that disqualify me from using the spaces?
Sometimes.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
So for nonprofit entities like Women's Business Center, we're actually hosting a couple of their events, and some of their events that you charge for, most of it's scholarship, but
Okay.
occasionally people pay to come attend those Women's Business Center events. So if it's a nonprofit partner that the library works with,
Yeah.
we can waive that generally. It gets a little stickier if it's purely for-profit entity charging people for access.
Okay.
But we can chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and is that you, or is there somebody else they should contact? I don't want to
Our-
send all this,
yeah.
traffic your
I
way.
can get you in touch with the
Okay.
right person. We're in the middle of hiring our new events coordinator,
Okay.
and that person will be kind of the
Take
point
over that.
person for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Victor, in the back.
Yeah, I have another question related to books. How does the library chooses what books to purchase?
Good question. Yes.
That's a
Yes.
That's an intriguing question. I went to
Yeah.
a brand new library, the Spokane County Library over in the valley, and I was surprised as to what they had to offer, referring to books.
Yeah.
So my question is, how do you guys in the library choose to buy books?
Yeah. So simplest answer is our collection development team. They look at reviews.
Team,
Collection development.
collection.
Yeah. And usually there's a team at each, well, it's all centralized. So our collection development team, they're at the central library. The county library, they've got their collection development team, I think, out at the Argonne
the
branch.
Argonne, yeah.
And they're sifting through reviews, looking at bestseller lists, and trying to pick and choose which ones they think are going to be of interest in the community. And then we fall off the cliff in terms of book bans and challenges to books, and there's an entire conversation that we could have about intellectual freedom. But I think the simplest way that I've been able to boil this down is that I find that we have stuff in our collection that I find morally reprehensible. We have stuff in our collection that I completely agree with, but the point is that it shouldn't be me deciding what you get access to or not. And I think the simple line is that the library should be there to provide access. We don't have to defend the content. It gets really slippery when we try to start defending particular content of one stripe over another. So we're just hands off. We're not the parent. We want the parents to be involved, but we're not the parent.
So when it comes to like a business book, is that just still that same team that decides what business stuff you have on hand?
Often, yeah, and I kind of outsource that stuff to them, but we have a suggestion form on our website to say, hey, you don't have this particular book, can you order it?
And you do have some audio books that you can get access to, right, as well? And
totally,
digital
yeah.
books? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are
Download-
both options.
Yeah.
Okay.
Downloadable audio, ebooks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Got the-
and
It would help answer that question a bit better to differentiate what the different collections are. Like most public libraries are what you call a popular collection, right? So it's for popular use by a community. So like if I want to look at old ag bulletins or something like that, I have to go out to the college and go to an academic library. So it's a little bit different. So
Sure.
you could differentiate those.
Yep, totally. Yeah, we're not a museum. So, if we've got stuff
That's
sitting,
really funny.
if we've got stuff sitting on a shelf that hasn't been checked out in 16 years, we're doing something wrong.
We're going to okay.
Yeah.
Mark, can
Yeah.
you go back real quick to the relationship between county, so I'm a county resident,
Yes.
not a city resident.
Okay. Yes.
If I want access to city resources like the ones you've been talking about, can I get those?
In some cases, yeah.
Short answer, mostly yes. I mean, some things like IBISWorld and Bloomberg, regardless of whether you live in Topeka or condos right downtown across from the library, you have to come into the library to use those. So generally speaking, yes. And there are some caveats, but let's just say yes.
Like demographics now.
That is
Demographics
available
now,
through
the
the
county
county.
library subscribes to it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And SpokaneBusiness.org is your place. So the question was, still about that overlap between the two libraries. If you have questions, SpokaneBusiness.org is the place to go, and it will tell you by resource where you can get access to it, which library has it. And like Mark said, if you're in the county, there are opportunities to still get a city card, but there's some things you have to kind of look at.
And if you're looking for kind of the deeper explanation, the sticking point is like, say for demographics now, the price that Spokane Public pays is based on the population area that we serve. The price that the county library pays is based on their population. And so our database vendors, they get bent out of shape pretty quickly if they figure out that you're giving access to people in Missoula, you're not paying for those people.
Right.
So that's why we've got these weird kind of paths that you have to
You used
navigate.
to also limit the number of DVDs you could check out,
Right.
whether you were city or county
Right.
resident.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, well, I think that took
The
us
throwback.
to the very end. We're right at that time. So round of applause for Mark for coming and
Thank you.
chatting with us. Any final thoughts for this group as we send them on
Yes.
their way to do business research?
Yes.
Okay.
So, question about like the panels. If that's something that library can gather, because our current toolbox, it's working out really well, but it's not set in stone. So if there's something out there where you're like, oh man, if my business just had access to, independentpanels.com or whatever it is, if it falls beyond your grasp and it falls beyond my grasp, let's get a group of people together in a room and figure out if we can make it happen, because that's working out really well.
It didn't come up specifically with this group, but you also have some resources that do make sense for nonprofits, where they can look at like donor research and things like that as well.
Totally.
Okay, so I think it was important to say that. Yeah. Last question, Victor, you get it.
Just as a reference, most of us know how to get a hold of you, but could you tell us how to get a hold of you?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
how to get a hold of Mark. Good
I've
question.
got business cards.
And
I'm
you can Google it. I'm
Slightly
sure.
off my game. I came with a very small stack of business cards. If you already have my contact, pass it on. But
And
Yeah.
if you check out LinkedIn and you find where this live is, it'll live there forever. But he's tagged in all the posts, so you can find his LinkedIn profile too, which has his contact information as well, if you're active there.
yep, yes.
So,
You're available there. And your
Yeah.
scheduling calendar is there too.
It is, yep. So if folks want to set up just an individual one-on-one meeting, that's available on the SpokaneBusiness.org page. It's kind of hard to find right now, so new version of the page, it'll be a little bit more prominent.
okay, awesome. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, and that's
Yeah.